Music is made up of many different elements: tempo, dynamics, articulation, rhythm, tone, but there's one that's seen as the most important. If you saw my last video, then you'll know that when people talk about music theory, they're nearly always talking about notes. Melody, harmony, chords, things like this. And not only that, but when I'm teaching my students and we're learning a piece for the first time, the first thing we think about are the notes. I'm sure this is the same for you. You want to learn a song or a piece of music, and the first thing you think about, what are the notes, what are the chords? If you're an experienced musician, you might take it for granted that you can take this information so quickly and put it under the fingers and start listening to the music and start thinking about some other musical ideas. But with my students, who are often beginners, they won't be able to think like this because they'll be so focused on the notes. So what often happens is they play back the music that they've just learned, and it doesn't sound exactly as they'd hoped it would. So why is this? Well, it's my fault really, because if we're working through a piece of music together, I'll often suggest that we'll start with the notes, especially if we're reading the music. And so what will happen is they'll spend time learning the notes and learning the rhythms, and then when it comes to play the music at the end, it sounds lifeless, like there's no energy to it. And then I'll play the music back to them, and it sounds really good. Now, that's not to say that I'm doing the right thing and they're doing the wrong thing. If anything, it's the other way around. I've been showing them the wrong thing. The reason their music sounds lifeless is because it only contains one of the musical ingredients: notes. The other ingredients, like dynamics, tempo, phrasing, these help to transform the set of notes into something really musical. Just like when we're baking a cake, all the ingredients need to come together to make something great at the end. Leave out too many of these ingredients and you're left with something that no one really enjoys. So the students need to add these different musical ingredients into their music to give it some energy. So that's simple enough. We'll talk about one of the ingredients in a class. I'll offer some suggestions. They'll go away and practice that. And then next week, we'll talk about another one of the ingredients. And slowly we'll start to build up something that sounds a lot more enjoyable and a lot more musical. But none of this actually offers the student the chance to communicate how they're feeling or how they want to express themselves through music. To do this, we'll need to look at learning music another way. Think about the following phrase: that's all. Now, if I were teaching someone how to say this, I could tell them how to pronounce the words, which order to say them in, and that would be fine. You definitely understand what they're trying to say. But it wouldn't have much meaning when they said it. You wouldn't know the emotion or what they're actually trying to express through those words. And I actually have two examples of this. One where there's no emotion and no meaning in the words, and one where it's full of meaning. And you can really tell the difference. So this is the first one from Google Translate.
That's all.
Well, the words are correct and they're clear, but we don't really know how this person is feeling. It's hard to imagine these two words, that's all, in what context they're actually being placed. And if a person was speaking in this voice in a film or a podcast, I probably wouldn't enjoy listening to it, and I wouldn't feel as if I could actually connect with the speaker. Now let's listen to how Meryl Streep says the exact same two words.
That's all.
The words are exactly the same, that's all, but there's so much that she's communicating that we can pick up on.
That's all.
Her slow and soft tone of voice tells us about the mood she's in and how she wants to continue with the conversation. The lack of an accent on any of the particular words shows that there's no real emphasis on one of the meanings. And her body language and eye movement also says an awful lot, even though that has nothing to do with the words. It's a much better performance because the idea that she's trying to communicate is really clear to the audience. I really like this quote from Victor Wooten's book, The Music Lesson. If you stop playing notes, music would still exist. And it's the same thing with the example of that's all. With the Google Translate, there is no expression behind those words. All we have are the two words.
That's all.
But with the Meryl Streep example, there's so much more. She could mumble any little phrase or even say nothing at all and we just have the body language, and she would still be telling us so much about what she really thinks and how she really feels. When we talk, like I'm talking now, I'm not actually thinking of the words that I'm saying. Instead, I have an idea in my mind that I want to communicate, and then it's put through my voice box and through my speech, and it's translated into a sound that you can then understand. If I start thinking about each individual word, the whole thing starts to fall apart and it really doesn't sound good at all. So it turns out that most of what we actually communicate is not through our choice of words, but how we express them and how we shape our voice and our body language. So how does this apply to music? Well, we've established that if we want to communicate in the same way that we do when we speak, we need to be able to observe and listen to our thoughts and our feelings. If you've been playing music a long time, this might seem quite easy because you're so familiar with the technique and reading and listening that you can essentially play on autopilot and really listen to these thoughts as you're playing. But for beginners, this isn't so easy. So I think it's really important to begin with this experience of listening. This can be to the teacher, or it can be to different performances of the same piece, or it can even be trying to imagine the music in your own mind. This way, there's an opportunity to observe your thoughts and to experience all of the different musical ingredients without being limited by this need to just focus on the notes. And then when you come to practice the piece and learn more about it and learn the notes, you'll be coming from this place where you're aware of the different ingredients and also what you want to communicate when you're playing the music. One philosophy that I really like to think about is that I'm not a guitar player, I'm a musician who plays the guitar. Because this is just a box of wood with some strings. It doesn't have any music in it. The music always comes from the musician. It starts with my own ideas that I want to communicate, and then it's translated through my technique into my fingers, through the guitar, and then the listener hears the sound. Which is the same idea as when we're speaking. Our lungs and our voice box, they don't contain any of the ideas that we're actually trying to communicate. They're just the tools we use. The really important thing is the ideas that we have within us. The great thing about this is that everyone is able to do it because we all have experience using this method. We all speak a language where we're able to observe our thoughts and our ideas first and then translate it into speech. So try and do the same thing when you're playing music or if you're a teacher working with students, and hopefully this set of notes will transform into something really musical. Thanks very much for watching, and if you'd like to know more about notes and the role within music theory, then watch this video just here.